Honorable members, order.
Switch on the microphone. Switch on the microphone. We're rising on a point of order.
On a point of order.
The microphones must be on.
Welcome to Politics Unmuted, where our microphones are never muted and we turn up the volume on all things political. I'm Conita Hunter, the politics editor at News 24.
I'm Peter Dutoy, assistant editor for in-depth news at News 24.
And I'm Lisa Gatandwa, the News 24 political reporter.
Coming up, we'll be talking economic recovery, which some politicians have described as a wish list and a letter to Santa. But we'll also delve into what's been described as the corruption pandemic and how the ANC is simply not getting a grip on the situation. But first, thank you guys for joining me. It's been a really, really exciting road up until this point, and so I'm so excited that we're doing this.
Yeah, it's good being in the office, even though it's empty. It's good being back at our old stomping grounds.
I'm really excited because I have come to know the two of you over the past 6 months while working remotely, and I know how fired up the two of you get at news and current affairs. Peter, I imagine you arguing with your TV, watching Donald Trump late at night. Liz, if you could throw a shoe at a populist politician making empty promises, you probably would. Me, on the other hand, I'm just chacharak, so I'm happy to be here.
I think you're right. I mean, but luckily the US elections are coming to a close and we can stop arguing with CNN late at night.
That's if Donald Trump doesn't become the president.
But, let's not talk about... let's talk about the US politics for 2 seconds. Don't you feel better about being a South African when you watch what's going on in the US?
Look, I've been watching this for a good while now, and, they can take some lessons from us. But seriously, if you think our institutions in that country have also been undermined by a sitting president, I mean, we've been through it. We could have given them some pointers, but it has been fascinating to watch.
I think just not only America, but you look at how the first world countries, the big countries have handled COVID-19, and you look at how we've handled COVID-19, I think really we have done exceptionally well as opposed to our competitors.
But they do politics like sport, and I think we're starting to do the same thing. It's a national pastime, isn't it, Gwyneth?
But I do think when it comes to the economy, they're probably going to have the last laugh.
Yes, no, that's true.
because we are really not in a mood to point fingers at them because of how bad our economy is doing at the moment. But I mean, first on our agenda, let's talk about the economic recovery plan. The president obviously presented last week an economic and reconstruction development plan to Parliament, something that was a cobble up of, ANC proposals, NEDLAC suggestions, what business had put forward, and the president obviously taking on a leadership role in terms of our economic recovery, not leaving it to the finance minister and to the National Treasury. Obviously, there has been some pushback to that plan. And for the first time, opposition parties are not saying that this is a bad plan. They're saying it's a wonderful plan, but it's just a wish list.
There's a couple of things that we need to discuss. First up, and you've touched on all of them, the efficiency or the, is this the right plan for where we are now? I mean, a lot of criticism that have been leveled against Ramaphosa is that it's a rehash of stuff that we've heard over the last couple of years. It is fascinating, though, to see the opposition's reaction saying, we'll help you. This is a great plan. It's a change of tack. It's a change of political direction for them. Obviously the opposition parties' main function is to criticize government and to identify issues and problems as they see them. So maybe it's an opportunity to move forward. But the plan is so broad. And the biggest issue, I think, with the plan, guys, it doesn't adequately address the big issues that we've got in the country. SOEs remains the biggest drag on our fiscus. How many times have we now heard that we're going to break up Eskom into 3 constituent parts? Stuff needs to start happening. And I think the discrepancy between a plan on a piece of paper and implementation is still too big.
I completely agree with you. When I look at some of the points, that the opposition parties really delved into. The IPPs, for instance, Spectrum, deadline for Spectrum being we're still waiting for Spectrum to be next year. Yeah. The issue of IPPs, the fact that the IPPs, even though he's given municipalities and private companies a leeway, but they still have to go back to, these IPPs still have to go back to Eskom. Eskom has to buy the energy in the IPPs. We look at the SAA bailout, I think it's 16 billion, 14 billion or 16 billion. That's also something COSATU has really criticized. We look at the 300 rands for grant money for COVID grants. Even though he's given COSATU some, he's given them some, he's appeased them to some degree, but they wanted the grant to be extended quite further. President has got the right ideas. He's got the right instruments. It's the deliverables. And that's what has been happening in South Africa for a long time, is that since the dawn of democracy, is that we do have these plans. Yeah. We had the NDP, but we can't deliver. And that's been the biggest problem for this country.
No one is going to look at the president and say your promise for 800,000 job opportunities is a bad thing. We need jobs. We need job opportunities. But the question is, there was a similar proposal made some years ago, and there's been no data that was even successful at all. So what gives you that level of confidence that you are going to be able to deliver on these job opportunities? And then the most important question is, where is the money going to come from?
I don't know if, are you asking us if there's confidence? Because I don't think there is confidence, Konita. I don't think you can have confidence that it will be implemented. I mean, when Tito Mboweni became Minister of Finance in October 2018, he issued the same warnings as we are hearing right now. I mean, when he became Minister of Finance, he had a look at the national accounts, he had a look at our books and said, look, guys, we're in trouble here. We're in trouble here. SAA, Eskom, unemployment, the extraordinary high wage bill in the public sector. I mean, all these issues he identified. We are 2 years down the line, and what has changed? Have they taken just take one problem by the scruff of the neck and sort it out? Yeah. You can't do everything, and we're now so deep in the mire. That if the president was to walk in this room, I tell him, just pick one of these big problems and then sort it out. Just one.
That's the part of the Ramaphosa administration and the frustration that I have with Tito Mboweni-led Treasury, is that your job is not to tell us what the problems are. We know what the problems are. Your job is to fix it. And I think that's where someone like the finance minister gets away scot-free all the time, is because he's like, but I've been telling you how bad things are. Here's the rot at Eskom. Here's the rot. So they repeat the problem, which is a far cry from where we were in the Jacob Zuma administration. But how are you going to fix it?
Well, guys, I can ask you this because you guys work in the trenches with politics. Does Tito Mboweni have the political backing to implement the changes that needs to change?
Thank you. I was actually about to say that that's the problem.
Because selling off SAA, I mean, let's take SAA for example. If we're going to sell off SAA, I mean, that breaks like 42 conference resolutions or whatever the case may be, then everyone's head is on the chopping block because that whole. So does he have that the political backing? Can he implement what he needs to?
And he expresses that frustration, oddly enough, on Twitter or with his cooking with fish and garlic. But
I heard you say cocaine, and I thought, I missed that.
Cooking.
Not cocaine.
Can I say cocaine? I'm sorry,
Tito,
Tito.
if you're listening
I'm sorry,
to this,
Tito.
don't sue us.
But it's funny enough that I had this on my notes, is that the rift between Tito and Ramaphosa in terms of the planning, and also you can see it in terms of what the frustrations that are expressed by Tito. Tito has been saying during COVID-19, the sale of cigarettes needs to come back because we need that money. He said he's had a strong stance on COVID-19 grants. COVID-19, we don't have that money. So as much as you say that, Kanita, that he is a man who's consistently telling us about the problems, but he's also sitting there in the corner and no one is willing to give him a hand. I think that.
Yes, but also, why do we make him and Ramaphosa victims when they have the power?
Okay.
If you don't want to be politically unpopular, it's not on us.
But I don't think,
just do the politically unpopular thing. Do your job.
The problem is that they're beholden to the ANC, they're beholden to the NEC, they're beholden to SACP, they're beholden to the markets. I mean, they're beholden to COSATU. That is the issue, is that Ramaphosa is this consultative president, and he really can't run away from that image or that brand that he has. Maybe you guys can elaborate more.
Which this plan was very indicative of, in the sense that he wanted to please everyone. He really did want to please everyone. So why would you mention something like we need to introduce, or the idea of introducing a wage an unemployment grant, for example, when we really can't afford it? We just cannot afford it. So by mentioning it, it's like almost like ticking off a box. Okay, I've appeased the unions. Okay, business, let me appease you. But these are all competing things, and you can't appease everyone.
Which means we're going to continue muddling on through. We're going to continue in this quagmire of indecision and a lack of progress for the foreseeable future.
Like you said, give me one thing.
Just sort out one thing. You know, if it's SAA or health or whatever the case may be, just sort out one thing. You know, what's the use of having political power if you don't wield it, Juanita and Liz? You know, we can say what we want about Jacob Zuma, but he knew, the executive office of head of state is not an insignificant power that you've got.
He just went too far.
He went too far. But Cyril Ramaphosa needs to understand that he does have constitutional powers as head of state, and he needs to
running out of time, Peter.
Us or the country?
The country.
No, the podcast is still fine.
The podcast is still fine, but Ramaphosa is running out of time. When is he going to get the? I'm sorry, Ramaphosa. Get the balls
the cojones.
Now it's cocaine. Now it's balls. We're going to be sued.
But Liz, you're right. So what I found fascinating about the US election, we spoke about it earlier, is lots of these news outlets are taking stock of what Trump achieved. His promises and what he achieved. If we're going to do the same thing with Ramaphosa, I'm wondering what that balance sheet will say. Now we're approaching next year. You've got the ANC's NGC. We know it's not an elective conference, but it is going to be contentious. And guys, the contestation for 2022 has already started. So Ramaphosa needs to, if he wants to stay, he's going to have to tell the electorate, this is what I've done. Yeah. Otherwise, like Liz says, we're running out of time.
But it's interesting when you see the opposition and how they're preying on the divisions within the ANC. It was very clever of the DA to say to Ramaphosa, let's combine your supporters in the ANC and our support on the opposition benches, and let us help you pass your reforms. And I thought, you sneaky man, John Steenhuisen.
And you essentially become a DA president.
because that's exactly how the ANC would remove Ramaphosa. If there's anything that, Ramaphosa can literally set the country on fire and he won't be removed as president. But if he aligns himself with the DA to pass reforms, he's as good as gone.
And guys, that's the problem with the ANC, isn't it? They see everything through the prism of the party. There's nothing outside that prism of the party. When you speak to, like I'm sure you guys do, we all do, you speak to people in the ANC on as many parts of the many divides that there are, but the problem is always diagnosed through the prism of the ANC. It's not what's good for the country. And look, guys, what's happening in the country now is not good for anyone, least of all ANC members.
And what's happening in the country, obviously, is this corruption pandemic that's persisting. And it's always been a big issue. But it really is a big issue now, because if you don't sort out your corruption problem, you are not going to sort out your investment problem. And without investment, there is no economic recovery plan to speak about. How bizarre is it that almost 2/3 of spending in relation to COVID-19 procurement is currently under investigation by the Special Investigating Unit? So let's look at the figures very quickly. Of the 15.6 billion rand spent on personal protective equipment and other COVID-19 procurement from April to August, the Special Investigating Unit is probing contracts procurement with 10.5 billion rand. So that's 2/3 of spending during this time.
You think you can't be shocked anymore?
We saw this train coming.
And people said it was going to happen.
So sad that we did, though.
We don't have this money, do we? We didn't have this money. It's like a drunk uncle maxing out a credit card, getting another credit card, and then pissing it away again. This is what's happening. And there needs to be repercussions. Where are the repercussions for this party and this government going to come from? But the fact that we spend so much money on PPE and 2/3 of it is under investigation, I thought I couldn't be shocked anymore. But
it's scary. You look at
people need to go to jail.
Yeah.
I don't think our jails, we have enough jails for this. I'm just talking about COVID-19 corruption alone. I feel like we need to take these bankrupt hotels and turn them into Saudi Arabia.
But really, if you look at, for instance, Ramaphosa spoke about 664 billion of monies that he's been promised by investors worldwide, and of that 170 something.
This was obviously pre-COVID, right?
Yeah. Of 170 something of that has been delivered, but it exposes if we're talking about what has been delivered as opposed to what the investors are promising, it exposes what investors think about South Africa, and that's and the fact that we have COVID-19 corruption, it further gives our investors a jitter. The investors further get, okay, am I going to be able to come to this country and bring in my money, and am I going to get deliverables? Am I going to get profits?
The whole, when you speak about the COVID-19, the PPE pandemic, the corruption pandemic, it says a heck of a lot about the ethics and morality of the governing party. That, using a national health emergency where people died, where hospitals were under extraordinary pressure, where our whole way of life was upended, that this was seen as an opportunity to eat again,
I don't want to place it purely on the governing party. Yes, we can look at the ANC, but I think it says a lot about the morality of South Africa as a whole. Yeah. I think you look at, for
but
instance...
the fish rots from the head, and really this is a manifestation of that.
Yeah. Yes, fair enough.
The thing for me is that the corruption pandemic is so entrenched in society that it's actually like an organized crime syndicate. And the governing party has become an organized crime syndicate. So I don't really think that we actually can hold people accountable in a way that would be fair to the public, right? I think what's more important, and I could be wrong, is that we need to just plug the holes. We need to stop the looting. Let's start there, and then we'll hold people accountable. Or I don't know if we could just
what can we do?
How about to use amnesty?
No, we're not going there today.
Why can't
we are
do
not
that?
going to Tulimat and
Why can't we do
amnesty.
both? Why can't we do
No, I think you're right. I think, systems need to be... Look, like Liz said earlier, the plans are there. The systems, when you like we've all done, when you read through AG's reports and you attend meetings of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, both in Gauteng and at Parliament, the systems are there. But when you work with human beings, and when the system, you said about the fish that rots from the head, if the system is corrupted from A to Z, when the supply chain management system from the conceptualization of a tender to delivery is corrupt, it's very difficult to plug those holes. So you need carrot and stick. The stick's not working very well at the moment. We've seen some arrests. NPA is starting to awaken from its slumber. The Hawks have been pretty surprising, and that's a different topic altogether. But you need the stick as well.
I do think that we need to do both. I think that there needs to be consequences. We need to see people going to jail. But at the same time, I agree with you that those holes need to be plugged. We need to go back to the drawing board, find out what was lacking, find out what we need to do in order to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But it's not something that it's new. It's not these kind of suggestions. The governing party already knows them, but I'm not sure what's lacking.
And I mean, Ramaphosa was warned. I think it was outside Helen Joseph when he was on a walkabout just at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and journalists asked him, "What about the impending corruption that we're going to see?" And he said, almost naively, that I'm not going to allow it to happen. So the fact that he said that he was not going to allow it to happen, and now 2/3 of COVID-19 procurement in this short period, April to August, is under investigation. Where does the buck stop?
Well, I certainly feel for the new Auditor General. I forget her name, but I mean, she's got a job cut out for her. Conita, we can debate this, but we've been sitting with corruption and writing and speaking and talking about corruption for more than a decade, and we're only now starting to see some form or another of accountability being exacted. Luckily, we are seeing people going to court now, but it's a long way to go.
I wish we could see a lot of people going to court in municipalities, because that's where the rot is.
Yes.
I'm talking about, for instance, municipalities in the Eastern Cape where I come from.
Yeah.
That's a different movie.
I mean, that province alone,
the wild west.
Exactly. That province alone kind of demonstrates the trouble that we're in. We're really in a critical state in South Africa, and no one has been held accountable for. Every single year, the Auditor General comes back with financial reports, and every single year it's the same thing in all of those municipalities, and no one is held to account. Municipal managers still remain at the helm.
But also, there's no political accountability. I mean, we're speaking about criminal liability and civil liability, but there's no political accountability and liability either. I mean, when you speak about a municipal, I was in Senegal last Friday. The town looks, I mean, the roads are terrible. The water is intermittent. I mean, electricity is cut off almost all the time. You know, everyone suffers under poor service delivery. But the municipal managers remain in their positions, and they earn serious money. You know, a municipal manager in Machwabeng, which includes Senegal, north of 800,000 rands a month, you know, or year, for doing what?
And so the ANC, you know, in this COVID-19 crisis, knowing now that obviously their support base, the economy has really, you know, made people hungrier, more desperate, you know, exacerbated poverty, the racial divide, etc. So the ANC obviously knows that it needs some sort of reform in this regard, because
it's in trouble.
It's in trouble. Local government elections is coming up, and so they came up with this grand thing in August where they said, if you are implicated in corruption, you need to step aside. And what is the month now? We're in October. September.
End of October.
We're end of October. It's almost November.
Yeah.
And the ANC is now looking for legal advice because they don't know what step aside means.
It's actually funny, when I spoke to some of my sources straight after that NEC meeting and
in August.
A lot of them said that they failed in that they haven't expanded in what is stepping aside meaning. What would stepping aside mean? And the people that need to step aside are going to see that loophole and they're going to use it. People like Zandile Gumede and her followers have already started to use
because
that.
What does it mean? Does
There's
it mean you go on a holiday?
Exactly.
So you're
There's no
employed by
guideline.
Parliament and you step aside, so you still get your salary, you perform no duty for 2 years or 3 years, use the funds from the state to fight your case, and then what?
It's difficult to see. I wanted to say a positive outcome, but it's difficult to see any progress on this issue. I mean, like you say, it's 2 months, almost 3, August, September, October, you know, 2.5 months after that momentous decision, which everyone hailed. But the ANC have not been able to internally self-correct or internally decide how they're going to manage this. I mean, you won't see people voluntarily stepping aside.
Bongo is
back at Parliament.
There's no way he's going to step aside. There's no way Ace, if he does get arrested at some point, I'm not sure, but there's no way that he's going to step aside. I mean, they're going to fight this tooth and nail.
Which then sets the precedent for a councillor in a municipality in somewhere in rural Limpopo.
Andile Lungis.
And your friend. Our friend, the friend of the media. So it definitely sets an important precedent. I think the ANC's National Working Committee this week has agreed to get guidelines on how the stepping aside would work. They've approached Advocate Nina Malindi to come up with some sort of legal opinion, but also they want him to provide a legal opinion on this very contentious issue of family members of politicians doing business with the state. So that's one issue in the ANC, right? Because in light of Ace Magashule, Nomvula Mokonyane and others, right? But then there's a little bit of a more broader issue which Kasatu has been really pushing hard at NEDLAC, and that is whether politically exposed people should be banned from doing business with the state.
Look, it's so complicated. It's so convoluted. I mean, any process like this, there will be resistance. And you could well imagine court challenges against whatever the legal opinion might say. You can well imagine if the NWC orders someone to step aside, you know, going to the High Court for an application, then to the SCA, then to the Constitutional Court. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if the ANC was serious about this, it wouldn't have needed to go through this convoluted legal process to figure out what does step aside mean. If the leadership, Liz, had moral authority, you know, then people would have listened to the leadership. But now everyone's compromised.
But and also the reality is that this is not a new resolution. This resolution was unpacked at the 2017 NASREC conference. So it's not something, it's just that they never followed up on it. And again, ANC saying something that they will do something, but not really copping up.
Like the economic plans, you know.
And so I had a very funny conversation with someone who said to me, it's not our fault that you guys take what we say very seriously. I was floored. I was stunned to say, I'm a person of many words. I had no comeback. It's like, you know,
Donald Trump politics.
Well, you know,
it's not our fault you think we're going to actually implement our resolutions.
from
That's
God's
not
lips to
on
your
us.
ears,
Yes.
you know. So let's not take them at face value.
Yes, and that's the problem. I think that's where the idea or the plan for politically exposed persons to not have any dealings with the state. That's going to be something that the ANC or the Ramaphosa administration will have a hard fight or a hard battle.
Liz, you can't legislate for everything. You can't have a regulation or, you know, it's some things are right and some things are wrong. You know, if an organizational culture is such that you have to nitpick over every single thing, then there's a big fundamental problem. The ANC, they've got some serious fundamental issues in that organization. I mean, PEPs and doing business with the state and all this. I mean, it's
And that's just this year.
Can you imagine the machinery and the infrastructure, you know, everything that you have to build in your party to ensure that no one does something wrong because you don't trust anyone? Because that's in effect what they're saying. We don't trust everyone, so we have to legislate and make rules for every single thing. It's impossible. Sometimes things are wrong or right, and they don't know what it is.
So the one thing I want us to explore in a future episode is this constant argument of, you know, where must our kids do business with? Because the state is the biggest procurer of goods and services. How fundamentally flawed that argument is. That where else must we buy Maseratis and Ferraris from if we can't, get it from the state? And I think maybe there's some goodness in them in admitting that, because you understand the economic crisis that South Africa is, that literally those who are in power in this country or in leadership in this country only see the state as the means to solve all our problems, and no economy can be fixed if we constantly just pull and pull out of the state.
We should maybe get the Chief Procurement Officer of Treasury in here and have that discussion with him and talk to him about, you know, what government is doing, what Treasury is doing to try and tighten up those rules. Look, Juanita, I think it's a fascinating question that you're posing, and it's a philosophical question about how business and economy and opportunity works in this country. I mean, if you only see that the state as the sole opportunity to get ahead in life and as a source of entrepreneurialism, then we've got a problem. You know, then the problem is much lower down in the system, where we're going to have to create a entrepreneurial class where people need to think outside of the box and need to go and look for business opportunities and opportunities for economic advancement elsewhere. The problem with procurement from the state all the time is that it's almost always dependent on who you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, the examples of rent extraction there is legion. There are so many of them. And you spoke about the cars. I think what really riled me up the last week or the last couple of weeks is to see what happens with taxpayers' money. You know, you buy a Maserati or a Bentley, not one, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I mean, it's...
So I had this conversation with a friend as we wrap up. I'm like, why would you just take the money and open a cheese and yama? Like, you can employ 4 people there, and open a car wash and employ 5 people there. It won't do, like, it won't
take anything out.
But like, just, you know, if you're going to steal 200 million, like, employ a few people.
What I can't understand about that 200 million is, why can't you do the job? You're going to get the money. Why can't you do the job?
But okay, that's also an future podcast, so you guys gotta come back for the next episode. But I think we need to explore what the state capture era did for corruption. Corruption always happened. What state capture did, and especially I think the Free State, is that it was free money. You can take the money for nothing because it was a collusion of private individuals, politicians, and civil servants all working together really, really tight.
And they were fearless.
Absolutely.
Because it was with impunity.
I mean, how do you just take 50 million for no reason and just take it out of for nothing? Nothing, not even an invoice. So that's all we have for you today from all of us at Politics Unmuted. Thanks for listening. This episode was produced by my colleague Catherine Rice and recorded by Shante Schatz. Music was courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound. If you've enjoyed this episode, please come back to News 24, rate us, and follow the conversation on #PoliticsUnmuted. Goodbye.